Imagine a man so wealthy
that when he walked through a foreign city, he accidentally collapsed their entire economy. Not with war, not with weapons, just by spending his own money. Now imagine that man was African. And imagine that despite being the single richest human being who has ever lived on this earth, most people on this planet have never heard his name. His name was Mansa Musa, and what they did with his story is one of the greatest erasures in human history.
To understand Mansa Musa, you first need to understand the world he ruled. It is the early 1300s. Europe is in the middle of the Dark Ages. Plague, poverty, constant war between petty kingdoms scrambling for scraps of land. Meanwhile, in West Africa, the Mali Empire stretches across nearly 2 million square kilometers. It controls more territory than Western Europe combined. It governs over 400 cities. It is home to some of the most sophisticated universities on Earth. And sitting at the very top of all of this is one man, Musa Keita I, known to history, the little of it that was recorded, as Mansa Musa. The word Mansa means King of Kings. He wasn't just a king. He was the Emperor of Emperors. He came to power around 1312 AD after his predecessor, believed to be his brother, sailed west into the Atlantic Ocean with 2,000 boats trying to discover what lay beyond the horizon. He never came back, and so Musa inherited the throne. What he did with that throne changed the world. He expanded the empire. He strengthened trade routes. He built cities and mosques and schools. Under his rule, the city of Timbuktu became one of the most important centers of learning on the planet. Scholars traveled from across the world to study there. Manuscripts, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, all of it happening in Africa in the 1300s, while Europe was still burning people alive for reading books. But none of that is even the most remarkable thing about Mansa Musa. The most remarkable thing was the money. Let's talk about the wealth, because numbers alone won't do it justice. Modern economists have tried to calculate what Mansa Musa was worth. The closest estimate? $400 billion. In today's money. To put that in perspective, Elon Musk, currently the richest man alive, is worth roughly $300 billion. Mansa Musa was richer by $100 billion. And that estimate is probably still too low. Because here's the thing about Mansa Musa's wealth. It wasn't just money sitting in a vault. It was production. The Mali Empire sat on top of the largest deposits of gold and salt in the known world. At the time, gold and salt weren't just commodities. They were power. Salt was so valuable in the medieval world that Roman soldiers were literally paid in it. That's where the word salary comes from. And Mansa Musa controlled more of both than anyone else on Earth. His kingdom produced roughly half of the world's entire gold supply. Half. Every year. Year after year. And he didn't just sit on it. He traded it. His empire's trade network stretched from West Africa all the way to North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Merchants came from Morocco, Egypt, Arabia, and further still, all of them desperate to trade with Mali. And at the center of all of it was Mansa Musa, collecting, expanding, building, growing richer every single day. But the world only truly discovered the scale of his wealth in 1324, because that was the year Mansa Musa decided to go on a trip, and the trip broke the world. As a devout Muslim, Mansa Musa was required to make the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Now for most people, the Hajj is a deeply personal and humble journey. For Mansa Musa, it was something else entirely. He assembled a caravan that historians still struggle to fully comprehend. 60,000 people. That's not a typo. 60,000 people. 12,000 of them were personal servants, each one dressed in pure Persian silk. 500 of them walked ahead of him carrying golden staffs, each staff weighing 2 kilograms of solid gold. 80 camels followed, each one carrying between 50 and 300 pounds of gold dust. This procession stretched so far across the desert that people at the front couldn't see the back. It moved through the Sahara like a golden river. When it arrived in Cairo, Egypt, the city stopped. The Sultan of Egypt, one of the most powerful rulers in the world, came out personally to greet Mansa Musa. And then Musa did something that no one expected. He started giving money away. Not a little. All of it. He gave gold to the poor in the streets. He gave gold to mosques. He gave gold to government officials. He gave gold to anyone who came near him. He spent and gifted so much gold in Cairo that he single-handedly caused inflation across Egypt and the entire Mediterranean. The gold market collapsed. Prices across North Africa and the Middle East rose sharply and didn't recover for over a decade. 10 years. One man's generosity broke an entire regional economy for 10 years. When economists talk about the impact a single individual can have on global markets, Mansa Musa is the most extreme example in recorded history. And he didn't even mean to cause harm. He was just being generous. He continued his journey to Mecca, spending lavishly the entire way. He funded the construction of mosques in every city he passed through. He paid for scholars and poets and architects to accompany him. He left behind libraries. He left behind buildings. He left behind legends. By the time he returned to Mali, the whole world knew his name. Maps began to appear across Europe showing a figure on a throne in West Africa, holding a golden scepter. On a 1375 Catalan atlas, one of the most important maps of the medieval world, Mansa Musa is drawn in the center of Africa, crowned, golden, undeniable. The Europeans knew he existed. They knew he was the richest man alive. And then, something happened. Mansa Musa died around 1337, after roughly 25 years on the throne, and the empire he had built began to crack. His successors were weaker rulers. Internal conflicts tore at the empire from within. The Songhai Empire rose to challenge Mali's dominance. Drought and famine hit the trade routes, and slowly, the greatest empire in African history began to fragment. By the late 1400s, the Mali Empire had effectively collapsed. But here's what never gets talked about. The knowledge didn't disappear. The universities of Timbuktu continued operating. The manuscripts survived. Over 700,000 ancient manuscripts from the Mali Empire era still exist today, stored in libraries and private collections across West Africa. 700,000 documents of science, philosophy, mathematics, medicine, law, astronomy, written in Africa, preserved in Africa, waiting to be studied. Most of the world doesn't know they exist. And that brings us to the question that Africa Truth Story exit to ask. Here is a simple question. If Mansa Musa was the richest human being who has ever lived, if his pilgrimage literally reshaped the global economy, if his empire produced half the world's gold, if European cartographers were drawing him on their maps, why is he not in every history textbook on Earth? Why do most people, even highly educated people, go their entire lives without hearing his name? Why is the conversation about historical wealth always about European kings, American dynasties, Asian emperors? Why is Mansa Musa, objectively the wealthiest human in recorded history, treated as a footnote? The answer is uncomfortable, because acknowledging Mansa Musa fully and completely destroys a narrative. The narrative that Africa was primitive. The narrative that African people had no sophisticated civilization before Europeans arrived. The narrative that was used to justify centuries of colonization, enslavement, and extraction. You cannot tell that story if you also teach children that a black African king was so wealthy. He broke the Egyptian economy just by passing through. The evidence was always there. It was always on the maps. It was always in the manuscripts. It was always in the architecture still standing in Mali today. They didn't destroy the evidence. They just stopped talking about it and hoped you wouldn't ask questions. Africa Truth Story is asking the questions, and we are not stopping. Mansa Musa, the richest human who ever lived, the king who broke an economy with his generosity, the emperor whose empire produced half the world's gold, the man they tried to make you forget. Now you know. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Africa Truth Stories because the truth is here, and we are just getting started.
Subscribe for more.